if the Oscars had a category for best music supervisor or best soundtrack, today's guest would be a multi-recipient. He's been a music supervisor in movies and TV for going almost 30 years. He's had extensive long-term collaborations with the likes of Harmony Korine, Martin Scorsese, Richard Linklater, but most notably, many know his work with Wes Anderson. We're here. The latest installment of the Wes Anderson collection on the French Dispatch contains interviews and essays covering all aspects of that movie, including an essay I wrote called "The First Cut is the Deepest," covering the music in Wes Anderson's movies. So it's my pleasure to welcome Randall Poster to the podcast. So
great to be with you.
Thank you, Randall. Before we get into what we're here to talk about, I want to start at the beginning real quick, a little background in that. I'll ask you this. What was the music that was played in your household growing up? What did your parents listen to? If you had brothers or sisters, what did they listen to? And what were you listening to growing up?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up in the sweet spot of the golden era of rock and roll music, really. Born in 1961. So, we were musically as a family, we were kind of supercharged by the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I would say. That was something that was sort of, I was made to understand that was like a moment in time that I was able to kind of be present with. So, I grew up in New York City, WABC, WNEW on the FM side. It was really, a great time to be tuned in to what was happening in music, and radio was delivering it. Record stores, would you walk in and you could listen to music as well as buy records. And then, through friendships, friends of mine, I was the oldest child in my family, but I had friends who had older brothers and sisters. So that was really where we got a chance to kind of maybe be a little bit more adventurous in our listening. My parents were fans of pop music. Again, growing up in New York, there was Broadway and there was music on TV. And, a friend of mine today actually commented about a picture that I had posted of David Cassidy. We talked about how much we adored the Partridge Family.
Right.
And so I would say at a certain point in time, if I could have changed my life, it would have been to become, a member of the Partridge Family.
Do you remember the first record or album you bought as a kid?
Yeah. So the first album I bought was Rod Stewart, Every Picture Tells a Story. That was the first LP I bought. I remember buying for myself. And then the first single I ever bought, which I was buying singles before I was buying albums, was Laughing by the Guess Who.
Nice picks. Very good. And so you're born in 61, so that means you obviously you came of age in the 70s and 80s in your youth.
Right.
I'll ask the proverbial question, especially being in New York. Did you gravitate to punk or disco, or were you?
Well, you know what? The beauty of it was that, the drinking age back then in New York City was 18, right? And so you could get into bars and nightclubs pretty much at 16. Mm-hmm. They sort of didn't really necessarily always check your IDs. They kind of just looked you up and down, really. So you could do, say, Studio 54 on Friday night, and then you could do, CBGBs on Saturday night.
Wow.
So it was really pretty. And, for me, I think I mean, it's funny how people hated disco, and yet it's proving itself to be another evergreen genre, you
Hmm.
know, and and I mostly was gravitating towards, wherever there would be girls involved, you know.
Right. Speaking, just as a side note on the of that scene, I just Monday night I went to me and my sister. We went to that live IMAX event of Stop Making Sense. Uh,
Right.
they just restored in 4K,
Yeah.
which was amazing. Uh,
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
mhm.
It's funny is that I saw some pictures, and seemingly David Byrne was Jerry Harrison was separating
Right.
David Byrne from Chris and Tina. It seemed that way to me in the pictures.
Yes, it was.
Uh, yeah, but
That,
those were, I mean, I had the good fortune to be able to go to school in Providence, Rhode Island,
mhm.
and that was the fact that it at that moment in time that the the Talking Heads were just sort of it.
Mhm.
Um, they were like the hometown band in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right.
And I went to college really with the two records that I played my first semester in college over and over and over were Remain in Light and Can't Stop the English Beat. Those were my two big like go-to. That's how I was introducing myself to people with those two records.
Mhm. Uh, Just on a side tangent about this, since you were seeing shows out so young, I got to ask because I always hear, did you ever see television, and what was that like? Did you ever
You
see?
know what? I don't know that I can't remember seeing television. I mean, I've worked with Tom Verlaine, or I
Mhm.
worked with Tom Verlaine on I'm Not There, but I can't remember seeing television. But
What was he
I
like?
I did
What-
I he was very very serious. If you listen to if you watch that movie, his the guitar that he played on Cold Irons Bound kind of became a piece of score, was a running thematic through the movie.
Mhm.
He was all business. He wanted to be paid in cash. I
Yeah,
had to explain to him that that wasn't really possible in the
right,
situation that we were in.
right. No, I get that because I think Marquee Moon is like one of the great albums of that decade.
Yeah, yeah.
That
It
that
it
that's
it, it
just
always it always it always sounds fresh.
yes, yes, it is. I mean, See No Evil is just an amazing song.
Yeah.
Um, well, so before you fell into the position of music supervisor in your 30s, I guess. What were you doing, and what did you want to do before that?
Well, so what happened was is that I graduated from college, and I didn't really have any sort of clear
What did you study? I'm sorry, what did you study?
English.
Okay, me too.
English.
That was my undergrad.
Yeah. So didn't really have much of a plan. And so at a certain point, as it was coming to a close, I realized I needed to do something, and to forestall law school. And so a friend and I wrote a script about the college radio station. And long story short, it was called A Matter of Degrees. Our big break was that we decided we wanted to make this. I wrote a script. People wanted to buy the script. Me and a couple of friends, we felt like, let's try to make this movie. And so we spent a couple of years gathering the resources, figuring out how you take people's money to make a movie. And we made this movie. Our big break was that we got into the lab at Sundance. And that really legitimized us to enough of a degree that we were able to start shooting. We made the movie. And we did all these original songs for the film that was a moment where what they had been calling um, indie rock or college radio became alternative music.
Right.
So we actually had a record that came out on Atlantic Records, and people were, the movie played in theaters, few theaters. It was in all the good film festivals. It wasn't really perfect, you know, and um, and so people started to ask me to help them with the music in their movies. And then I decided that what I really wanted to do was work with great filmmakers, and that if I made music, the ballywick, that would be the way to engage. And I was lucky enough that it kind of worked out.
Uh, just for our listeners, is the movie available on DVD or
I think,
Blu-ray?
you know what, it came out on Laserdisc,
Mhm.
right? And it's evidently, my kids tell me that it's on YouTube. Um, but it's really great. It starred Ari Gross, this great actor Wendell Pierce,
Oh
uh,
wow.
the late actor Tom Sizemore. Michael Imperioli got his SAG card on the movie, and then we had these John Doe from X had a big part in the movie, and then we had Fred and Kate from the B-52s were in the movie.
Hmm. I gather you haven't looked at it on YouTube in a while, too.
Yeah, I've not looked at it since we finished it. Really, I think the last time I looked at it was at the premiere. We were in the competition at Sundance, and we played the first night at like 10 o'clock, and the heat was hissing, and people like probably had their first day on the slopes,
Mhm.
and it was 10 o'clock, right? And Roger Ebert was there, and this is our first movie, our first screening of our movie, and like I was sitting in front of him, and like 15 minutes into it, I had the courage to like turn around to see how he was responding. And I turn around, he had his head back, and he was like just sleeping away, snoring away.
Just and what I'm just curious, what year is this movie? What year? So
It came out in 1990. We
okay,
made it in like 1988. So I really didn't do anything except work on movies.
okay,
Right. So I went and in between that and say the credit that I have on, I think the first one is like Kids or Crossing
right,
Guard. I also produced another small movie that I didn't write, called The Paint Job.
right. What so yeah, I was going to bring that up. So, and your first official credit, super music supervising, is 1995 Kids. That's at least
Right.
on IMDb, that's your first credit. Which
Right.
I should say. So that means that I've been a admirer of your work from day one because I still have my Kids soundtrack CD.
Yeah.
Which I
Yeah.
was what was I? I was 16 going on 17 when that movie came out. So I was riding
Yeah.
the wheelhouse.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what do you remember? Because that was a very obviously that was right in that pocket of those alternative soundtracks between
Yeah.
the Daniel Johnson cuts and the folk implosion
Yeah.
tracks on there. So how did that come about? Because obviously that was a movie that was had a whirlwind release because of its
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think I actually started working on The Crossing Guard before I was working on Kids.
Mm,
Like I said, I'd done some help. I've helped some filmmakers do the music on their movies, uncredited, during that period too.
mhm.
And I got I got the script of Kids, and it said Kids by the world famous writer Harmony Korine. And it cracked me up, and the script was just such a knockout. And I sought out Harmony and was introduced to him, and we spent a lot of time together during those days listening to music and buying records. And it was his idea really to do the music with Lou Barlow, because Lou Barlow had Sebado, but he also had this project Centrado, and it was really contrary to sort of what you might have thought would be a skateboard movie on a certain
Right.
level. And so I spent time with Lou Barlow wanted to do it with John Davis, and they were going to be called Folk Implosion. I think they had put a single out maybe,
Mhm.
and I actually would go up to Boston and sit in the studio with them, and their music, it worked in the movie. It stuck. Didn't necessarily go in all the places that they thought they were making music for.
Hmm.
And then that groove was pretty catchy. Hello? Yeah,
Yes.
the groove
Yeah.
was pretty catchy. And so we encouraged the Lou to write lyrics to it and put a vocal on it.
Mm.
And that was, and then the craziest thing was that it was a top 40 pop hit.
Right. Yeah. Natural One. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great song. It still holds up.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I always try to put it in other movies.
Hmm. The
Uh,
and I just remember the opening credits song, that blast of "Daddy Never Understood."
Daddy Never Understood. Yeah.
Just that
We
wakes.
did a video. We did a video for that one too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that wakes up the neighborhood. You crank that up
Yeah.
at the right
Yeah.
time.
It's that, I mean, that movie is just, it is just all itself, it's committed to its vision.
Yes. Yeah. And then you did, like I said, and I don't want to go title by title, but you said the other one that same year was Crossing Guard, uh,
Crossing. Yeah.
with Sean Penn. I'm curious. Um, so were you integral to getting that title, that opening title song, that Springsteen song? How did that work? Uh,
You know, I, that was like I have vaguer memories of that because we worked on that movie a long time, and I
mhm,
was involved with it while it was shooting. I was really focused on like the exotic dancing for the most part
mhm,
that we had to do, and working with Jack. That was the last score that Jack Nietzsche had ever done, and I worked closely with him on the score. The songs that are in there, it's like, Sean knew Springsteen's sister from back in the day, and
right.
you know Sean, Sean brought Jewel. He discovered Jewel. Really, and so it was really a lot of those. The ones that were sort of the marquee song type things
Mhm,
were born really out of Sean's relationships, and then I would follow them. And otherwise, I don't remember really what other songs really we put in the movie. Oh,
What
we
and I
had we had the singer Hada Brooks
mhm,
is on camera in the nightclub very briefly,
right.
but I had the great treat. Hada Brooks was this 1950s stride piano genius chanteuse who actually had a television show in Los Angeles, like the first Black woman with her own television show, I think, in America.
Mhm,
And she had retired for like decades, and then she was sort of coming around, and we put her into Studio A at Capitol Studio A's, and she played and sang until like she couldn't play anymore. She was like in her 80s, and then she was in the movie. Although
mhm.
I'm not even sure if you see her in the movie.
I gotta ask, because you mentioned it. What was it like uh, working with Jack Nietzsche at that time? What was he like at
No,
that?
he was unreliable,
Yeah, right,
and he was totally guilty. Like he was every time you said hello to him, he was apologizing. For you didn't even know what he was apologizing. He was so guilty.
hmm
And then I was lucky enough that I had some really good, great, long conversations with
hmm
him. But he was a junkie, Jack Nietzsche, and yet he was a motherfucker, Jack Nietzsche.
yeah, right. I mean, his scores are, I mean, amazing. I mean, Cuckoo's Nest and
I mean, Cuckoo's Nest is, if you read Milos Forman's memoir, his
mhm,
story about Nietzsche's score for the film is one of a kind.
right.
It's called what's it called? The chapter is called Suitcase Orchestra. I think it's what it's called.
hmm I mean that, and then I'm ambivalent about the movie, but his ambient score for Cruising is another one that is
Yeah,
just
I mean, I think too is like Blue Collar is really. I mean, because I think Jack helped do song. He did songs and
right.
yeah, he was a legend. He was a
Mhm.
legend in many ways. He was a legend.
Right.
Right. He's like a person he rightfully a legend.
Hmm. And then just go through it, and then you did a lot of really, I guess, a lot of the hip, cool indie soundtracks of the '90s. I was you worked with I guess Susan Jacobs on I Shot Andy Warhol with the Mary Harron movie, which one of my favorites because
Yeah.
that's where I mean, because of the budget, from what I understand, the budget was so low it couldn't get the actual song, so had to get did these covers of the
I think
period.
I always like doing that. I always like recording our own music.
Right.
So I certainly wasn't unhappy about that.
Yeah. I mean, the story I've heard Mary Harron say that a couple of like some of the Velvet Underground songs she wanted. I guess Lou Reed was adamant he didn't want nothing to do with
Yeah,
anything.
well, we had John Cale. Yeah, John
Yeah.
Cale did the score for the movie.
Right. And he wanted nothing, and Lou Reed wanted nothing to do with Valerie Solanas, so he was not going to, I guess, allow any of the originals in that movie.
Yeah,
But it's a great period soundtrack of the those covers. Um,
yeah.
well, before we get to Wes Anderson, one of the collaborations that you also started in the mid '90s and it carried on to this day is Richard Linklater. Um,
Right.
uh, how did that come about, and what's it like doing a Linklater soundtrack?
Um, we were introduced. He and I are the same age.
Hmm.
We were introduced, and I did the Eric Bogosian Suburbia, which
Right.
was interesting. We did a cool soundtrack for that. I think we had Beck on that, and Flaming Lips, and maybe I think it was Neutral Milk Hotel on that record, maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
And yeah, and then we did School of Rock, and that was, I mean, that was heavy lifting for a lot of people on the music side, just getting these kids to practice and
Hmm.
you
How
know
how did the
record.
who had the idea for the original song to go with the Mooney Suzuki? Who had what was that? How did that come about?
You know what? I think that come out of conversation with Jack Black.
Hmm.
And then it was funny is that, we used the Mike White lyric, and then they wrote the they wrote the they wrote the track, and then we used their track in the movie.
Hmm.
And I remember I was with my friend George Trikulius, who was producing some of the tracks for us, and we went to meet the guys, and their practice room was in a storage facility in like off the turnpike in New Jersey. So we'd gone, and that was before Uber. Like we had to, like, we got a car, we took a taxi, and we'd have to call for a car. And we went, and we had this meeting. We were in a storage locker, and then we were on the street after. It was a very good, positive meeting, and I love those guys. And then we were like standing on the like service road to the turnpike, like waiting to get a car. It was like the most unglamorous life in the movies.
I mean, Electric Sweat is one of the great garage rock records of that garage rock revival that took place around that time.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Sammy James Jr. He knows how to get that great guitar, those great guitar sounds, and he knows
Yeah.
how to write a hook.
Right. And to me, it's one of the great miscarriages of recent years that that song was not nominated for Best Original Song. That would have just
Yeah.
that was a great song. Well, the one Linklater movie I want to ask you about is you did the soundtrack to Boyhood. And so how did that work? I mean,
Which one? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Boyhood. You did the
Boyhood. Yeah.
So how did that work?
So
When,
I was not involved over the course of the many years. You know,
okay,
I'd known about it.
right.
And Rick when he has tremendous historic recall, in terms of, you know, what songs were meaningful in what years to himself.
Hmm.
So, the song, really the my job really on that one was to just make it all happen just because we had so many songs.
Right. Yeah. I
So the
mean, I was
focus
wondering,
there was really more at points like on like the creative business side of things.
right. So I'll ask you, I guess I would assume the most expensive cue for Boyhood was the Band on the Run from Paul McCartney.
No, you know what? I think what we had to do was that we had to get everybody to agree to the same amount of money.
Hmm, I see. Because it's an amazing uh
Yeah,
collection in that
yeah,
movie. And
yeah,
because it also, not only is it, because of the breadth of it, because over the 11 years, but then you have to make sure the song is correlating to the right year and the right time of the year that the movie is
yeah,
taking
yeah,
place.
yeah.
So
Thankfully,
yeah,
that wasn't my job on that one.
right. um, one
And
soundtrack.
Rick and I have just finished a movie together, Hitman, that's going to play at the New York Film Festival.
Right. I'm excited for that.
Yeah,
I-
it's really fun. It's really,
right.
really fun.
One soundtrack I have to ask because it was my favorite film of its year. It was actually my favorite film of the 2000s, and I was obsessed with this movie, and I was obsessed with the soundtrack, and to the point I bought the soundtrack CD, and then it wasn't enough. I actually made my own playlist of the entire movie soundtrack in chronological order, and that's for the movie Zodiac, um,
Yeah,
David Fincher movie.
yeah. Well, here's my great memory of that one,
Mhm.
which 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 is what I'll carry with me, is that David showed George Drakoulias and I, we supervised that film together. He showed us like a 5 hour cut of the movie.
Mhm.
And I promise you that we walked out of it thinking like we should just, there was a lot of obviously visual effects that wasn't done and all those things. But it was like I was captivated by
Mhm.
that. And the sound design in that film by Ren Kleiss, who's I think Fincher's longest time collaborator. They're longtime collaborators. He really had such a vision of how he wanted the music to interplay with
Mhm.
the drama. And we found other songs and things. We threw in some songs and had some good ideas, but really it was like this guy Ren Kleiss was really the 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 sonic driver. And you don't even rare it's rare that there's a person who plays that role on a movie.
Mhm.
He's just, that's his thing with David.
Mhm. I what I'll so I'll ask you about one song on that soundtrack that became kind of its signature song, "Hurdy Gurdy Man" by
Yeah,
Hangover.
Hurdy Gurdy
Uh,
Man.
how did that? Did you suggest that? Did David have that in
I
his head? Do you remember?
I think David must have had it in his mind, although maybe it was from a playlist that we put. I really don't look. All credit goes to the directors for putting the
Yeah.
songs in the movies. And again, I struggle now to remember all of the process that landed things here or there.
Right.
Sometimes they do, but it's fate. I just really think about how Zodiac was such a great movie.
Hmm. No, it's I just rewatched it a couple of weeks ago, and
Yeah,
I told my sister like, "You're watching it again?" Because I watch it, it's a movie I return to, and it's an oddly despite the subject matter, it's an oddly comforting movie for me in that it's not so much the subject matter, it's those long sequences of process where they're just like, whether it's the
Yeah.
cop or the journalist, and they're just going through details and just going through, just
Yeah.
piecing it together, trying to get to a conclusion. And I just find that,
In
because
the pre-digital age, right?
right,
So I mean, so much of that movie, I thought, like, it's really kind of about how institutions can't communicate with each other,
mhm,
right? It's like they don't have a fax machine, or like fax
right.
didn't come through, whatever else it is. But
I remember at
the
the time,
masterpiece that.
yeah, at the time I said this is the best post 9/11 movie, is what I said at the time, what I would tell people.
Mhm.
It's a movie about post 9/11,
Mhm.
even though it's a pre 9/11 movie. And that's really what it's about the miscommunications. Um, but yeah, no, it's great. Had in 2004, you started your collaboration with Martin Scorsese. You worked on The Aviator. Uh,
Right.
and how did that introduction come
Can
about?
we pause for a second?
Yeah, yeah.
So I worked on a movie called Mona Lisa Smile.
Hmm.
And in that film, there was a ton of on-camera performance,
Hmm.
and we made new recordings for the movie. So the bands were rehearsed, and we really worked on the musical choreography. And the first AD, the first assistant director, was a guy named Joe Reedy, who worked with Marty, and he then introduced me to him as he was looking to make The Aviator.
Mm.
I'd shown that I had had experience in recreating period correct music and overseeing its performance on camera.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the highlights in The Aviator is the at the nightclub sequence where the Wainwright family is
Yeah,
performing. Um,
yeah. In
uh,
each decade,
right.
Rufus in the 20s, Loudon in the 30s, and Martha in the 40s. I mean, when I did that, when we pulled that off, I thought, okay, that's like, if it ended now, that would be satisfying, you
Hmm.
know?
Uh, well, to just and so you've done other scripts. You did Hugo, you did Silence, you did The Irishman, and
Right.
I'll ask about what's coming up. Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
What can you talk about that? And then uh, this is going to be Robbie Robertson's last
Yeah.
contribution. So what can you say about that?
So, largely, it was very interesting to be back on film sets during the period we shot
Hmm.
um, the film in Oklahoma. It's coming out of, still sort of in the red zone of COVID. Um, and the musical component was, again, a situation where we had some distinction, to a musical distinction, to sort of give the contours of the passing of time, right? So there's a sequence that's in like 1919, and we had like fiddle music, ragtime, but not ragtime, bluegrass.
Hmm.
And then became 1923, and there's like a party in town, and then there's uh, like a early jazz band, ragtime jazz band. And then we did a radio, jumping in time, we did a radio orchestra in like 1940.
Hmm.
Um, the bluegrass, the fiddle music we brought in a woman named Raina Gellert, she's the greatest fiddler I've ever heard in person, and is a master in the old time repertoire. And she put a group together, and it actually is where they're there playing at a wedding scene, at a wedding.
Hmm.
So those were the sort of on-camera tasks. Some of that music bled into, a little bit of source music.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Robbie Robertson did this one. I always describe, people would always ask me about my relationship with Robbie on these movies. And I say, I work the day shift and he works the night shift. So we kind of do, both of us do sort of are focused in our own areas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, he was, you couldn't really design a cooler looking rock star.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really beautiful that, there's this really significant film score that he's done for this film that will be everlasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, so now let's talk about what we're here to talk about, and that's Wes Anderson. And so
Right.
you've been there from the beginning. How did that introduction occur, if you remember?
Wes and I were introduced. Somebody thought we would like each other. He was finishing Bottle Rocket, or he'd finished Bottle Rocket, and there was no soundtrack for Bottle Rocket when we first met. And I went out and I made a soundtrack deal for the movie. We put out the soundtrack, and during that time, we started talking about Rushmore. So we met in Los Angeles. We started to talk about movies, and I always say that we kind of have been working ever since that day. Like, the work that we do between movies has really been some of the most fun times.
Mm-hmm. So about the Bottle Rocket sound, I'll ask you about I guess the key track. What do you remember about securing? Because you have said in many interviews that the Rolling Stones are kind of like y'all's house band.
Well, yeah. So
what was it like getting that first Stones?
we were much younger and had far less experience, but we knew we were behind getting the Bottle Rocket soundtrack out. And so basically I fought as hard as I could to get the permissions to do this for the soundtrack rights. And there were things that we couldn't get. And as far as the Rolling Stones go, once I saw that we weren't going to get the Rolling Stones for different reasons, we started to make our soundtracks with ABCO, which allowed us to then include the Rolling Stones on our soundtracks. And then I think that we've been trying, we get caught up in the movies that we're working on, but it's our intention to re-release the Bottle Rocket soundtrack with all the songs on it, with Love and with the Stones, and we'll do that with ABCO.
Oh, wow. Is that going to be like next year or in a couple?
I don't know. It's at a certain point, given the way things have been going, it's hard to get Wes's attention going backwards when we're trying to figure things out going forwards.
Mm-hmm. Rushmore was a real signature soundtrack. I remember when the movie came out, I went out like that week that it came out, I went out and bought the CD. And it was one of those things that was like in my car for like, a month. And all my friends were into, and so I had the only CD among my friends. So I was having to make tape copies of the soundtrack to all my friends.
Right.
And Rushmore was just one of those, just kind of one of those, I guess, what, I don't know what a John Hughes soundtrack was to kids in the 80s. That Rushmore soundtrack is one of those signposts, I would say, to us. It's just, it's a perfect soundtrack. Did you feel that could you tell there was like a market like uptick in like, in your game from Bottle Rocket to Rushmore between you and Wes? Because with that soundtrack.
Well, Rushmore was really the first soundtrack, the first movie that I supervised. So you know, our whole mode of operation. You know, we just started. I mean, we just had been introduced and started working together.
Mhm.
Um, you know, we went into Rushmore with a lot of things that we were set on.
Mhm.
And you know, that was a period where people were still buying soundtracks.
Mhm.
And it's a great one. And you know, the songs are so, I mean, it's kind of incredible that of all those songs in Rushmore were things that were really overlooked, you know, or
Mhm.
had kind of faded away.
Mhm.
Um, so
Are you did you find it amusing or just kind of like, hey, when because songs like, I mean, you kind of popularized the Creations Making Time on that
right,
soundtrack, and then on the Royal Tenenbaums, the Nico These Days song, and
right,
then, you know, within a year or two, those songs are being used in commercials, and it's clear
yeah,
that whoever's at the ad agency, you know, they had those soundtracks, and they're like,
yeah. I think you
like,
hear now. It's lately I've been hearing. Ooh La La, I think, is used by like every, you
right,
know, every,
mortgage
uh,
company or something, you know,
yeah, or it covers every, I've seen it, I think, in car ads, I've seen it in health insurance or whatever else it is. But that was one, like, you know, that was a track where it was like, you'd play that track for people or they'd hear that. They were like, what is that? I mean, it was such a revelation for people.
mhm. Well, and the other thing I tell people when I hear that and I say, and it's a Faces track, it's a rare Ronnie Wood vocal.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, Ronnie Wood didn't do a lot of vocals when he was a,
Ronnie Lane vocal.
yeah, yeah,
Ronnie Lane.
right, Ronnie
Yeah,
Lane,
Ronnie Lane.
Ronnie Lane. It's a rare vocal of his. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think he's doing like a Rod Stewart impersonation.
right. So and then as the kind of as the movies went on, they one of the things that I took away is that as in the later movies, they started to get kind of I mean, they always had, I guess, motifs, but they really got a very elaborate. Like, I'm thinking of Fantastic Mr. Fox, where one of yes, there's the Stones and some Beach Boys in there, but the dominant is the kind of the Burl Ives stuff, the those
Mhm.
very old 45s that kind of populate that movie. And I'm kind of curious.
Well, I think it's like, I think those I think those pieces. I think those it's like those songs are actually either born from or related to a lot of the kids movies that Wes watched, that we watched. You know,
Mhm.
um, more the old fashioned, you know, the old fashioned cartoons, or like, I mean, Burl Ives basically played Santa, was Santa Claus.
Right.
Um, and but there's, you know, I mean, it's brilliant. The whole the Desplot score. Uh, that was the first time we'd worked with Alexandre. Um, Bobby Fuller at the end, which is a song that Wes and I had been thinking about, talked about using in a movie for 10 years before we used it.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, on one of the on Moonrise Kingdom, how did the how did the idea of using all the Hank Williams come about? What do you remember of
you
that?
know what? I remember coming up to set in Rhode Island to see Wes for the first time,
Hmm.
and the freeze just said to me, "I think I want to use some Hank Williams in this movie."
Hmm.
That's kind of how it goes, right? It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard the story, is that when we were doing Life Aquatic, and Wes was living in New York at that time, and we used to meet on Sundays, and he would give me the pages that he wrote in the week. And then one week, all of a sudden, there was a line that said, Pele comes on board and sings a David Bowie song in Portuguese. And that was it. That was it. That was the only reference to it. So, you know, and then we recorded like 13 or 14 of these David Bowie songs, and basically there it is. And
Mhm.
it's incredible use of music in that movie.
Right. And then uh the one soundtrack that it's that was a little left of center, I thought, was the Isle of Dogs soundtrack. Um,
Isle of Dogs. Oh, the Isle of Dogs. We have a lot of taiko drumming.
right. And
What else
where
is on
did
the
you?
Isle of Dogs soundtrack?
How did that come up with the one song that recurs that West Coast art pop experimental band song? It's
Oh yeah,
that one track. And I described it in my essay. The vocals are kind of like a cross between Nick Drake and the Del Vikings.
yeah. I kind of want to go back and listen to that. I only can imagine. I kind of imagine somehow. I imagine that Jason Schwartzman somehow brought that into the conversation. Well, I could be wrong.
Hmm. And then
That was crazy because the guy, one of the guys in the band, and I
mhm,
can't think of his name. He was the longtime executive at Mike Curb's record company. Like the guy, like he had done that band, which didn't survive, and
mhm,
then he became this super, successful record company executive. Where that was so trippy, that music.
mhm. And I'll ask about the current film that just came out this summer, Asteroid City. And so, what was?
How about you don't want to talk about Darjeeling Limited, the great score, the great music in Darjeeling
I mean,
Limited?
Darjeeling. We can go on that. I mean, obviously the Satyajit Ray samples from the Satyajit Ray soundtrack,
Yeah,
and then that closing credits song by Dat was it the Dassin song?
Joe
Dassin.
Dassin,
How did that come?
Champs Elysees.
Yeah, what did that?
I mean, we've been trading playlists,
Mhm.
for decades now. So, it's like Tom de l'Amour in Moonrise Kingdom, which is one of our, that's one of our sizzle reel moments, right? The
Mhm.
Tom de l'Amour. And that was like we were working on a French we were working no we were working on a Japanese phone commercial or something. We were going through all of the French pop records,
Right.
and it was like we listened to that one. It was like, okay, take that one out of let's use that somewhere. Let's That's kind of how that's the best. It's like it's in his brilliant mind, these songs that he connects it with a sequence.
Well, the French Dispatch is unique in that obviously there's a little score, but um, more to the point, it's a lot of classical pieces on that one
Yeah,
in the French Dispatch.
and French Dispatch, but a lot of classical pieces in Grand Budapest Hotel.
Right.
You know, um, that yeah. I don't, what do you want to what do
Well,
we
I'm
want to
just
know
curious.
about
I mean,
that?
what I guess kind of classical music. How do you decide on like what this this piece of classical music? This is the one you want to go with this sequence and deciding.
Yeah.
Which,
So Wes and I are both really not all that, or we hadn't been all that well versed in classical music.
mhm,
I will say that I'm not well versed in classical music,
right.
and so and a lot of times when I was exploring different eras of music, I don't know it, so I have to sort of investigate it or study it or find experts and read books. And so you do all of those things to present all all of the variables, right?
Mhm.
And and then sometimes, like say in uh, um, uh, Darjeeling Limited, when you have the flashback in the garage when they're getting the father's car, and Wes wants to he says, let's use some classical. Let's use some classical music. And so we're just sort of trying to, I said, well, Satyajit Ray's favorite piece of his favorite classic piece was, Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. Well, let's use that.
Mm,
Right.
right.
So it's like, somehow it's like you could sit and analyze every particular, let's try the fourth movement. Let's try the fifth movement of,
Mm-hmm.
it's like somehow saying, okay, somehow there's a connection here. It'll make sense.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of classical music, I just on a little tangent here. Did you were you a fan of the Tar score? I don't know if you've heard that one, the original Tar score from last year.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
I was knocked out by that movie.
Mm-hmm. And the score in that is just, I mean, like you, I'm not as well versed in classical music as others, and but that Tar score just kind of blew me away. So I'm actually I'm actually looking forward to this year. I'm looking forward to Maestro, the Bradley Cooper movie
Yeah, me too.
with Bernstein, the Bernstein
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
and so I'll ask you this question. It'll lead into Asteroid City. Where did the how did the collaboration of with Jarvis Cocker come about? Because he has the a key song,
Yeah.
Dispatch, and then he has the closing credits song for Asteroid City. So how did that come about?
He's also, you'll be able to see and hear Jarvis in the Roald Dahl
Okay,
films.
all right.
So I did a movie called Velvet Goldmine with Todd Haynes,
Great
and
movie,
I
great soundtrack, great
and
soundtrack.
I met Jarvis
Right.
all those years ago, and we stayed friends. And we Jarvis has been involved in some of the albums compilations I've put together,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been working now on the West film. So, you know, he'd been running with us for a little bit, and then, he's just so great.
Mm-hmm.
How could you resist not putting him in your movies?
Right. Yeah, I was in high school, senior year, freshman year of college when I got into pulp. My introductory album was This Is Hardcore, uh,
Yeah,
which is a great Britpop uh, soundscape record. Just amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that Velvet Goldmine soundtrack, I mean, once again, um, covers and originals mixed in to represent that glam era. If I'm not mistaken, uh, Bowie didn't want any of his songs.
yeah. So that was one where it was sort of a late game curve, is that Bowie very politely declined, after maybe we waited a little too long, declined to let us use his songs. And I guess the way I've always told the story is that I was happy about it, because I felt like it would give us the room to do something which would be original,
Mhm,
and not just then be a Bowie pastiche.
mhm,
And the reasoning that we got was that he had been thinking about doing a Ziggy Stardust movie type thing. So, and then very quickly we got these songs from the guys in Shudder to Think, and we were like, we're going to be good, because those songs were just
mhm.
astounding.
Right.
And then Bowie, was so supportive of Life Aquatic,
Mhm,
and he was very, let us know how pleased he was with how things turned out with
mhm.
the Stow George versions.
Right. Well, and so the latest film is Asteroid City. What was the edict of using that music, the bluegrass and the skiffle and some of the and the fiddle stuff? What was?
Yeah, I think that it was, in this film, Wes wanted to fill it with songs, right? And I think the songs were, we wanted to be in time, in period.
Mhm,
Um, and and then it just, like, we found great songs.
mhm,
I gathered it all up, things like Tennessee Ernie Ford and
Right.
Burl Ives, like those are characters we've been with before.
I guess the highlight, the song that they used in the trailer is that I believe Johnny Duncan and the Bluegrass Boys,
Right, right.
Last Train to
Last Train to San Fernando.
San Fernando, and
Yeah,
yeah, and
that's
what do you,
it's funny because it's really a novelty song because that's the sort of the skiffle component, right? But Johnny Duncan was an American, and that was his biggest hit in England, really. Yeah.
and the other song that was used, that was highlighted, is that other skiffle song, Freight Train.
Freight
Uh,
Train, yeah.
uh, uh, is the other, I guess, kind of highlight. Yeah, and I mean, I guess the most known song of the sound is that Tennessee Ernie Ford was
Right.
15 tons, which fits well. And then
Yeah.
being from Texas, hearing the Bob Wells track is also.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big Bob Wills fan,
Mhm.
and um, yeah, and I love that the Slim Whitman tracks I think are great.
Do you have a holy grail track that you've been like putting on tapes or CDs or playlists, like trying to get, if not Wes, any filmmaker, like, you should really, try this song, use this song?
Yeah, I know that there are songs that like there've been songs in the past that I've tried, and like I try in every movie.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, Actually, there's a band from Austin called Boxtrot,
Mhm.
um, uh, and they have a song called "Soft and Warm," which I think is just the greatest track. I probably tried to put it in 50 movies. I haven't been able to. I need a lot of seconds to really for the song to deliver. A lot
Mhm.
of screen time.
Right. Well, I hope you get that one day. Um, so this is
Oh, and
non-related.
the soundtrack is coming out. The Asteroid City soundtrack will be coming out,
Mhm. But I mean,
and I think orange vinyl. We did orange vinyl.
okay, that's great. My last question, is not related to any of these soundtracks, but my favorite soundtrack of the year so far. I was wondering if you've seen the movie and you've heard it. It's the soundtrack to Ben Affleck's Air. I was wondering what you thought of that one.
I've not seen it yet. I've not seen it.
Um,
I've heard that they have all those songs from that. It's just those songs are so hard. It's just like it's funny is that what's been great is when you work in a rare period,
mhm,
because when I was doing say Boardwalk Empire and we were like in 1920,
mhm,
and even Scorsese is not. He says I'm blind. I don't open my eyes until 1925. It was great because I became the authority in a sense. But when you do movies like that are in like you work on movies, especially commercial movies that are set in the 60s and 70s, everybody knows every song. Everybody either I love that song. Oh, I hate that song. Oh, I love that. It just becomes. I find it hard to sort of swim in that.
mhm.
I
Uh,
think I guess my suspicion is that that's kind of what Air is like. But maybe I'm wrong if you like it so much. I'll see it on your recommendation.
I mean, I think cause I wrote about it because it uses because it's set in '84, so obviously it is it is neck deep in you know top 40 pop, and it uses those songs just so smartly, and kind of it cues you to the just the emotional points that were going on in that period, and it's just used so
All
smartly.
right. Well, I'll definitely check it out on your recommendation now.
Yeah. I just think it's great. The comment I said, it's the best period soundtrack of its type since Boogie Nights. The way the Boogie Nights used its pop music. It's what it reminded
Yeah.
me. Is what it reminded me of. Well, okay. Well,
Now you're bringing up my competitive side.
right. It's really well done. I think you'll enjoy it. Well,
Well, I'm
what?
looking forward to reading the essay that you wrote.
Okay. Well, so what are you working on next? I mean, I know the Roald Dahl short just premiered in
Right. So we
Venice,
did that, and
and Flower Moon's
you know,
coming out in October.
right.
So what are you working on now?
Um, I am working on the sequel to the Joker, to
Oh,
Joker.
oh, I
With the
forgot all about those.
with the strike and everything,
Right.
things are a bit upside down. So, I've been working on some projects that I'm hoping, we're going to get to shoot soon.
Right. Well, I'll ask about that real quick because I had made a note of that and I forgot to mention. You did the Joker soundtrack, which is amazing. And because you've been working with Todd Phillips all this time. Uh, tell me about that soundtrack because the score is amazing, but then I think when people went and saw that movie, I know when I went and saw that movie, I was kind of taken aback about the very uh concise select use of music in that movie.
Yeah.
How
Well,
did
Todd Phillips is a really, really fine film director, and he's
Mhm,
really great with music, and he's he's contrary in his personality,
mhm,
and I think that enables him to use songs like daggers, really,
mhm,
um, even if the dagger is like hitting your funny bone. Um, so, it was very, um, the musical element there was really orchestrated by his genius, really, in terms of a movie that really, on the page was kind of unimaginable in a way.
mhm.
Um, I mean, again, Joaquin is just unlike any other character, plays a character unlike any you've ever seen before.
Right. So
Um,
what was the Gary Glitter track? Was that pre-decided before that sequence? So he knew what he was going to
yeah,
be.
I think it came up when, so it was choreographed. I think
Mhm,
so. I
yeah.
think so.
Cause that, I
And
mean,
just the asterisk is just that Gary Glitter gets no money from the licensing of Rock and Roll Parts 1 or 2.
right. I remember I read that when it came out. Well, and to me, that was kind of the sick joke of that sequence of using that song.
Yeah.
Which I thought was ingenious. And because I mean, clearly that's the signature sequence of the movie. Uh, but to me, my favorite music
Well,
cue.
you will get to see those stairs again.
Oh, great, 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 great. My favorite music cue, the one that really left my jaw on the floor, was the kickoff to the riot sequence, scored to Cream, in the White Room, uh,
Yeah.
which I guess, I mean, that's one of those. It's funny, when you do Cream in movies, you go to like Sunshine of Your Love or a couple of the other tracks.
Yeah.
White Room is a great Cream track that, oddly enough, does not get the play that you would think it had gotten, and that just that
What have we used? Oh, we used Sunshine of Your Love in School of Rock.
right, right. I remember that, but the use of White Room for that riot is just that's just astonishing piece of use of
Well,
music.
I'm going to tell Todd how much you appreciate his musical
Yeah.
perspectives.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was blown away by Joker. My line on Joker, particularly that ending, that final climax, was basically Joker predicted the insurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah, It's the way I've always told people about that movie.
Yeah, yeah,
It pretty
yeah.
much 2 years before the insurrection, it was all there.
All right,
All right.
let's end on a happier note though. Let's end on a happy note.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the film Jesus Son? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, I had that. I have that soundtrack too. I have that soundtrack. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorites. So whoever's listening, try and watch the movie Jesus Son, however you can do it.
Mm-hmm. How
It's one of my favorite soundtracks,
and
featuring Doug Somm from
Doug Somm
San
of
Antonio.
San Antonio.
As anybody going to San Antonio?
How did that soundtrack come to you? How did that project come to you? Jesus' Son.
It came to me and this wonderful editor, Geraldine Peroni, at the same time. They had been working on the movie and it just wasn't clicking.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought us in, and that was really one of the most, and working with Allison McLean, one of the most fun, one of the most fun projects, just because she would, she and I were just, Jerry and I were on the same wavelength, and she would just take the songs and she'd say, leave it with me. And then she would cut the picture to it. So it was perfect.
Mm-hmm. And here's my last process question. Is there a different process? Because in the last, I guess, 10, 15 years, you've gotten into television. So is there a difference?
I mean, most of the television that I've done is they were more like they were working along a calendar, like a movie, whether it was Boardwalk Empire or Vinyl. Yeah, I think that's another conversation.
Okay.
That's another conversation.
All right.
I'm happy to have it with you.
All right. All right. Well, Vinyl, a real great show that ended too soon. I will say that. I'll end it on that.
All right.
A great show.
All right. Go when you get up, when we finish, you should go and you should listen to this record we did for Vinyl, that we had John Doe record a version of Strychnine by the Seeds.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the Seeds, not the Sonics.
Oh, okay.
I think it's the Sonics. Mm-hmm. Check that one out.
All right.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
I want to thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Bye.